This month, November, is the month of All Souls. And between that and our preaching series and our gospel this week about Jesus separating sheep from goats, I got to thinking about being in college and my campus minister. And above his desk on the bulletin board, he had a little poster, kind of postcard size, that said, uh, if you were accused of being a Christian, would there be enough evidence to prove it? And that question has been rolling around in the back of my head from time to time. And I think that it's actually one of the more helpful ways to think about this. So to start, I'm not saying that only people who are Christian get into heaven. That's up to God to decide. But for those of us who claim to be Christian, it's a fair question to go, well, how good were we as Christians? So the second thing I'd want to clarify is, one of the great things about being Catholic is when we've made bad choices and messed up, we can go to God in the sacrament of reconciliation and bring that and deal with it then, and have that forgiven and have that just erased. So the notion of, is there evidence for you to be a Christian, isn't necessarily a list of everything you've done wrong as evidence that you couldn't possibly be a Christian, because we know that we're human, we mess up. God knows that. God is willing to forgive that when we seek out his reconciliation. But the other side of it is, but what have you done as a Christian? And, so in my thought experiment in my head, I imagine the sort of grand courtroom, God or St. Peter on the bench and Jesus. I'm not sure who that is, kind of doesn't matter. And there's me, and maybe at the other table, there's somebody arguing against me, a devil's advocate. But I don't so much have a lawyer as I'm representing myself, because it's my thought experiment. And so one of the criteria that, I could clearly use is the gospel of this week. When have you fed the hungry, given drink to the thirsty, welcomed the stranger, clothed the naked, cared for the sick, and visited the prisoner? And, if you look over my entire lifetime, I've certainly done most of those things. Although I'm not sure that that would be my main line of argument, given somewhat the irregularity with which I do that. So for me, as I was thinking about it, I think it would be a desire to say, I've sought to live out my life in a way that I see the world the way God does and responds the way he does, and to look at it a little bit more broadly. All of that aside, I started thinking about this notion of the opposing lawyer, the devil's advocate, who might argue against me, and thought, I wonder what I could learn. What would a devil's advocate come at me with? And again, I'm assuming that we're taking past sins that have been forgiven off the table. So I think it would probably be a list of missed opportunities, or times when I said I believed one thing but acted differently. And so that to me was a kind of interesting experiment in my head, and I would encourage you to do it yourself, and see what your devil's advocate might tell you about the way you're living your life, and whether or not there needs to be any kind of adjustment or course correction. So with that, it's Thanksgiving week. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. Going to leave you with a couple questions, as I always do. One is, what would be, if you were to argue the case that there is sufficient evidence for you to be considered a Christian, what would be your major line of argument? And then what might you learn from a devil's advocate who might be trying to chip away at that?